So next up, we have Alex Delamotte, and Alex's passion for cybersecurity is humbly rooted in the early aughts when she declared a vendetta against a computer win. Over the past, I like the pantomime, this is good.
Thank you.
Over the past decade, Alex has worked with blue, purple, and red teams serving companies in the technology, financial, pharmaceuticals, and telecom sectors. In this talk, Alex is going to speak on the arduous task of providing defenders with actionable threat intelligence and how to approach detection with several familiar techniques. The title of her talk is Bridging the Gap, Cloud Threat Intelligence for Detection and Offensive Security Practitioners. Please welcome Alex.
Testing. Okay. Hi, my name is Alex. I work for Sentinel Labs. We're a little research organization that's part of the Sentinel-1 EDR company. And I'm here today to talk to you about threat intelligence. Thank you for coming. Thank you for waiting in line. I appreciate you all. Also, I forgot to mention, some of you saw ChatGPT help me with that title. Yeah, like to highlight that. So the agenda today, here are the items we're going to go over. I think the first thing that's important is we need to understand what is actionable threat intelligence, which we're abbreviating as TI here. How is it different in the cloud? And then we'll talk about some examples of what I find to be actionable threat intel. And there are also some limitations that I think are pretty important to discuss. So we'll go over those in the end. Oops, wrong way. There. Hi, this is me. I live in a little town you might have heard of called Las Vegas, Nevada. No woos? Really? You guys hate Vegas? What? Okay, I love it here. I'm sorry if you don't, but yeah, if you never leave the strip, I can understand why. It's chaotic. But yeah, I really like dance music. And I'll try not to talk too much about my personal stuff then, from here out. So, as was noted when I came on, I've supported a lot of different ops teams. I've done blue teaming stuff. I did threat research before. Further down? A little more?
There you go.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I never know whether it's going to be too much or too little. Okay, so I've done blue, red, purple. I guess purple is everything in between. And I was working at Amazon, company some of you might have heard of, before Sentinel-1. And I got to enjoy learning how to red team from people who have been doing it forever. And you know, I'm still a really awful hacker, but it was amazing to get to learn all these different things and how, you know, I think threat intel is actually really different when you're red teaming. Red teamers have entirely different needs. So I also helped to build out ops functions for several companies. And what that means is like, so you have a new program, you are gonna have a security team, good for you, you probably got hit by ransomware. But I helped build out threat intelligence, threat hunting, and a SOC. And the 0.5 companies was actually when I was building out like a function that was already established, but in a very large company that didn't have it specifically on this team. Anyway. My threat research background was mainly like Windows crimeware, like ransomware. I like that stuff. And a little bit of financially motivated APT, hello DPRK. And my fun fact is that I started my tech career in an ISP's network operations center. So I can confirm that the rumors are true. Furries run the whole internet. So be nice to them. Last thing, yeah, this talk is not representative of anyone's views other than my own, and maybe like the people I've worked with before, but not my employer. Never gonna get this direction right. Okay, so first off, what is actionable threat intelligence? I feel like actionable might be a buzzword. It might be one of those things people say, and they don't really know what it means. So how I'm defining it is, this is threat intelligence that ops teams, like detection engineers, red teamers, all the ops functions in between, can actually use. Thank you. And hopefully they can integrate it into a specific thing that they do, a detection itself, things that could be written into new signatures for whatever your product is. Oh no, it's too loud. Thank you. Thank you. So with that, let's look at the threat intel report vibe check. I spent a long time on this, and I'm really sorry that it's probably painful on the eyes, but I think it's important to understand here are some qualities of traditional threat intel. Let's talk about actionability. Here on the left, we have a very sad Drake. There we go. Okay. Drake does not like meaningless technical details. Sometimes us researchers can be a little verbose and gratuitous with details. If it's not contributing to the narrative of other people being able to understand the threat later, I don't really see the value in just demonstrating a certain level of depth. That might be excessive. Thank you. Insufficient context, I think, is a really big one that we see a lot. Some vendors are, I think, a little more prone to it than others. And it's when you're writing about something and you see maybe 1/8 of the story. And it's really cool that you're sharing information, but maybe it's not going to be the level of detail or comprehensive enough for an ops team to be able to put it into action. Assumption-based analysis kind of ties in with this because it might be when you have insufficient context, but it also could be maybe the bias of the author, which we also have another one here for check your bias. I think that as researchers, we can often be writing for ourselves somewhat or the things that we enjoy. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the most useful thing, and we'll touch on that a bit more later. We have an attack happened. We can't say how. Just trust me, bro. And I think a lot of us are probably used to that, assuming there's a lot of cloud people in this room. That one will definitely come up again. And the last two are a little bit petty, so I'll just skim over them. The nationality plus S, I really don't like when a report has like the Russians in it or the Iranians. It just kind of makes me tune out. Like, you're talking about some cyber attackers, not an entire country of people. And lastly, another new threat actor naming convention. We're special too. Our insight is unparalleled. Yeah, please, no more new threat actor naming conventions ever. Just saying. Okay, here in the middle, we have our shrug, our shruggy guy. Theoretical attacks. So this is largely, I would say, red team parlor tricks might fall under this if they're not repeatable. So please, red teamers, don't come like throw stuff at me. I love you guys. But it's not always going to be something that's actually practical to implement. We also, in this category, have a lot of like white paper research, like people who are doing their dissertation and need to like find yet another side channel vulnerability and write about it. People are still not using side channel vulns in the wild, to my knowledge. Let me know if you know otherwise, but I'm sure there's use there. I just haven't heard of it. The next one, trying to appeal to all audiences. I think it's really important to realize that everything is not for someone. So it's, you really want to understand who you're writing for. Old news, this is just another trait that was part of some reports that I had my team support me with this. I asked like, hey guys, can you send me the worst threat intel reports you know of? And like, I just wanted to kind of bash them. But it seems like old news being recycled is a common thread, maybe for like marketing materials. So not always irrelevant, but we want to keep it fresh. So here's the good stuff. This is what we want. So I think something that we do want is more suggestions for operational teams. Things that are like guidance, stuff you should do that maybe they wouldn't know. Some of it might be really rudimentary and seem obvious, but sometimes, especially less mature orgs, it might not be as obvious as it should be. So something being obvious is very subjective, and remember that nobody knows what you know. So we also have the goals of the report being aligned with the audience. I'm not going to harp on that much more for now. Links to relevant posts from other vendors. I love this. Please, researchers, cite other researchers' work when it ties in. I think it's really important, and it actually helps build really good relationships. So I'm a huge fan. You want to give a whole story, but you don't want to rewrite somebody else's work. So throw a link in there, give them some credit, and call it a day. Specific TTPs. I think we can all agree that's useful. And analytic tradecraft tips. I think this is really important. Some people might find it a little less operational, but I do think it's really crucial for researchers to share how they did something with other researchers. We all make each other better. So, actionable TTPs. These are things that let ops teams hunt, detect, or emulate the threat. And we have our examples here, like a C2 over a specified protocol port. These are things you can hunt for, detect, easy. Payload delivery via encrypted zip attachment might be a little hard to detect if you're looking at the contents, but you should be able to get the file header or the RFC signature at this point. Bernie once bold action. Yeah. All right, actionable TTPs, again, I still think, I know it's a little dated, we've had the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain for so long, but I really think that it's a good guideline to think about when you're writing something, does it really hit many of these bases? And it's totally fine if you don't have all of them. For example, if you're not exploiting a CVE, I don't know that you would have exploitation. You probably shouldn't. Or, a 0 day. If you're not actually exploiting a real vulnerability, exploitation won't be there. And you might be missing C2. Some stuff might not have C2. It just depends on what type of threat you're dealing with. You could also use the MITRE techniques. They're pretty similar, you might see, but I feel like this is a good simplified version that preceded it. So here, I'm touching again on bias. I see a lot of research that has it's obvious the author is kind of writing for themselves sometimes, and I am totally guilty of this. So this is not to say that I have all the answers here. I think I'm just bringing maybe even some of my own self-criticism to light. So I'm getting vulnerable with you here. We all bring our bias and interests into our writing, us researchers. For example, I like to talk about functionality, when I'm looking at source code of malware, or even, sometimes with binaries, I'm like, hey, this function is named this, it does that. I don't think an ops team necessarily needs to know that. So this is something that I find interesting because I'm an archivist. I really love collecting malware, and I think it's important to know the history of malware and to document it. So every ops team, too, has different needs. And again, nothing is for everyone. And that's okay. We're all different. I'm American, so I think I'm unique. I'm special. We're raised this way. But why do you write? I think that's a good thing to think about. As a researcher, why are you writing? Who are you writing for? Be self-critical, like a chicken in a mirror, or a rooster, whatever he is. He's looking at himself and he's thinking hard, who am I really? Well, I don't know if he's thinking about who he's writing for, but he's thinking about something. Who's the audience that you envision? Are you writing for a CISO? Are you writing for red teamers? Are you writing for GRC? I don't know if anyone writes for GRC, but someone probably does. Who's your audience, and how are they going to use this? That's how I came to the realization that I'm probably not helping people by writing every single function name that's in an info stealer. But again, could be useful someday. So let's take this to the cloud then. How is it different in the cloud? Threat intelligence is threat intelligence, right? That's what I thought. I moved from kind of a traditional Windows AD world. I think a lot of you know, on-prem, my litmus test is, does your organization use Teams for collaboration? Do they use it for interviews with external candidates? You should probably run. Sorry, I'm not a Teams fan. Things are different in the cloud though. So TTPs, I think they look different. I think that they're not going to be exactly the same. For example, we don't have like DLL injection. I don't think that we have the operating system to really worry about. And compute instances don't really count. Of course you can do this on a compute instance if you have the ability to, but we're not thinking about, can I inject a DLL into the underlying Azure infrastructure? You know, we're talking entirely about the service or the cloud service provider level. That's what's going to be actionable in the cloud. So again, this is the shared responsibility model. Every cloud provider is taking care of certain things for us. That's the shared responsibility. They're ensuring that the OS running these services that are virtualized under God knows how many layers, they're making sure that's all safe, and we're gonna take their word for it. I mean, maybe trust but verify, but yeah, we have to, because that's all we can do when we sign these agreements with these companies to use their service. So we have another vibe check here. No Drake this time. Sad cloud. So we have a lot of overlap. This is still threat intel. It's not an entirely different topic. It's just being contextualized. So insufficient context, I think, is a bit more prevalent in the cloud. I think that we see a lot of that because a lot of people, with this being a more nascent cloud community, are possibly not communicating to the fullest extent possible. We also have maybe some policies that prevent collaboration if, depending on the impact, which we'll touch on later. We still have an attack happen. We can't say how, but just trust me, bro. I think we'll always have that. And check your facts instead of your bias for this one. I'm seeing a lot of claims, because cloud is a nascent area that's still developing, that this malware is doing blank for the first time. And it's like, no. Well, one example was like, this is the first Kubernetes attacking malware. And it's like, no, it's not. Like, it wasn't even doing anything with the underlying Kubernetes infrastructure. People just wanted to make a claim. And I don't love sensationalism. Next. This is another shout out to marketing. Click here to read about one weird trick your cloud service provider hates. Yeah, they hate a lot of tricks. Theoretical attacks, you might notice, is bigger on the screen because I think, again, cloud is still evolving. We're still kind of new, and there's a lot of opportunity to discover something that's novel, and that's awesome. I love it. I love that it's novel, and it's super cool. And red teamers might be using it and implementing it successfully. But is it being used in the wild? Is it ready to be weaponized in the wild? I think that's really important to think about. If it's not, are we really doing much justice by trying to bring it to the attention of ops teams? And then the good stuff. So I think that informing about campaigns happening in the wild is one of the most important things for threat intelligence. It's very much missing right now, too. We don't have a whole lot. And there are definitely some good researchers and vendors who are putting out stuff, but we're really not getting, I think, the level that we should or the volume that's realistic. Threat hunting and detection guidance, of course, ties into what's happening in the wild. How can you detect it? How can you prevent it? Attribution to an actor group is in the heart on this one, and it wasn't on the other one because it's almost always in traditional threat intel reports, like always. Yeah, I mean, it might not be universal, but it's going to be like a known malware family. You're going to have some general idea of motives, and I think that's really absent from cloud threat intel often. Explaining how APIs and tools are used. This one, I think that's incredibly useful for both detection engineers and red teams, because these are very, very useful things that are very ubiquitous. We're seeing people use like AWS CLI and Bodo they're using it in the wild. How are they using it? What APIs are they calling? How can you detect that? And then again, analytic tradecraft tips are still here because that's still always useful, especially when it's a new research area where you might have a new technique or a new tool that you're using to find stuff. Please share. So here are some more observations. Larger threat intel vendors are not necessarily providing the best cloud intel, which was really shocking to me when I moved over to the cloud side. I think that traditionally there were a few major players in the threat intel world that typically deliver very consistently, and we're just not seeing them put out the cloud content. What we are seeing is smaller vendors and independent researchers who have more cloud-specific expertise maybe. They're doing a lot of the more actionable threat intel work, and it's really interesting. It could be even I don't know, big tech is being shaken up, as we know, with the economy, from regulation, all kinds of things. I think this could be it's like an interesting ripple effect maybe, I don't know. Experimental projects, I kind of mean like honeypots. I think that smaller companies have more latitude to do stuff like that, and honeypots catch a lot of really cool stuff. And smaller companies can move fast and break things. Now, one thing I also noticed, the real environments are complex, and we don't really see stuff talking about a holistic cloud attack. When it's an attack in the wild, we see a few pieces of it. This ties back into a non-comprehensive picture being painted. So we need to have a lot of detail about, I think, what the environment is like, what they're running, even if it doesn't touch that service, it's probably not as relevant, but it's still helpful to understand the topography of organizations that are being impacted by a threat. Lastly, ops teams need context about how actors are achieving access and what artifacts they leave behind, and that can be really challenging in the cloud. Sometimes you just see that one thing happened on one service, tracing it back into a full deeper investigation is not always the easiest. So let's cover some examples of actionable threat intelligence in the cloud. Starting with initial access and propagation. Who knew? Initial access, very important, very crucial for defenders to know this. I think it's, I don't know if it's more than half of the battle. It really depends on how bad you were owned, but it is very important. Unlike endpoint, they probably did not get in by phishing. I was looking at the MITRE attack matrix for cloud the other day and saw phishing is on it. It's oh, huh. I mean, yeah, I guess, but seems a little far-fetched. Misconfiguration and exposure, which I'm sure plenty of other people are talking about today, they're the biggest motivator. And here we have a screen cap of something from the recent Team TNT-like activity that I reported on with the awesome people at Permiso. And it does, it scans for a vulnerable Docker container with a specific version. We actually had a little trouble figuring out what exactly it was looking for, because 1.16 didn't align with anything we knew of, but it was an interesting thing to see. This is exactly what it wants when it's using this worming module, the DAPI pwn. Persistence is another very important TTP that we want to cover. Cloud persistence, I've seen, there are a lot of different ways to do it, just like in the traditional threat intel world. You can get persistence 1,000 ways, but one big one that I'm seeing with the info stealers that are moving to the cloud, like Alien Fox and the cloud pred stealers from Team TNT, they create admin profile. That's a useful one. We have it with the policy administrator access on the AWS side. And it looks for you want to look as a defender for calls to APIs update assume role policy. And this is a very myopic explanation. There are thousands of different ways you can probably do this. So create user was one of the flows to create the login profile. Then you make a group, and then you attach a group policy and add the user to the group. And next we have IAM hunting. This is a really cool one to me because it almost feels like real, old school threat intel. It's hey, static indicators, I love it. Actors can hard code the IAM details sometimes. We had This was from the Permiso Androx Ghost, which is tied to Alien, Fox, and Legion, if you're familiar with those threats. It's another credential stealer written in Python. It's an open source module that they both integrate. So I find this really interesting because this is one of the most actor-centric things you could find. Like, these are so specific that you know who you're dealing with if you find them, aside from maybe system, which is just a really nice, like, masquerade. Okay, privilege escalation. We all love privilege escalation. I do think it's a little more of an art than a science because there are so many ways you can do it. There's no one right way, of course. Which service has more permissions than the profile that you owned? Probably a lot. It really depends, but yeah. If you don't have permissions to deploy a compute instance, like maybe you're trying to run some stuff in a more minimal environment, you can always create an automated job, serverless execution. I had a Lambda there originally, but I'm trying to minimize how many buzzwords I'm saying. Or you can modify an infrastructure as cloud template, which used to be CloudFormation. And there was a great collection of techniques that I was just looking at recently on the cloud.hacktricks.xyz, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, especially red teamers. But I think for detection engineers, if you're not looking at that, you need to be. I love that site. It's really good. So, privilege escalation. Containers, as we know, they're a little more minimal. They are things that have just what they need to do their job, and it's awesome for that reason. But we found recently in the Team TNT-like cred stealer that it was using this creative workaround by making this bash load function here, which manually crafts an HTTP request from bash. They were missing the curl binary. So they were using this to download curl from the attacker's C2, and it installed it. That just blew my mind. It's like, oh, wow, this is so basic but effective. I mean, it's gross to look at because it's bash, but it works. Detailed recon techniques, yay, red teamers. Yeah, so I think I'm not seeing a whole lot on recon. Like when we talk about cloud threats that are happening in the wild, and we're not the cloud attackers, propagating these threats, hopefully. Maybe some of you are, I don't know, but we don't really know sometimes how they're finding these services. So this one is showing, we have here, this was from Alien Fox, and it was using leak IX or leak 9, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say it out loud, to look for, it's like an open source intel service, kind of like Shodan, but it's indexing vulnerable things instead of the whole internet. And they were creating requests to this to search for specific vulnerable services. And we see red team CTI or RISC can also use these services when it's like leak IX or leak 9 or Shodan or Zumai, the Chinese Shodan. Everyone can use this. So let's figure out how these attackers are finding targets and use these ways. So detailed intrusion techniques clearly explain how the attack is executed, and it's in detail. Why? Well, intrusion techniques are repeatable. Usually if you get in once, you can get in twice. And the whole teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime, whatever that old saying is, I think that really applies here. If you understand the intrusion, you can probably replicate things like this. There are a lot of services that are often misconfigured, and people will, just take advantage of that or look specifically for it. We have Jenkins up here, Laravel, and there's been a lot with Redis. And I'm sure there are a few other commonly misconfigured applications that people might know of. In the screen cap here, this was, I believe, from the hack against the TSA, who accepted their pony recently. God bless for getting the no-fly list leaked. And I thought it was really amazing how the researcher who found this detailed exactly how they owned this entire path. And it's like, why is nobody else documenting it this well? Now I think they're like not allowed to come to the United States because they leaked the TSA list. But it's an ordeal. I feel like maybe more people should be writing detailed research without maybe leaking all of it. But So post-exploitation activity, we want to know how actors are using known attack tools, because those are like one of the easiest things as a red teamer that you can use, like real frameworks that are available, open source. Many of them are free, some are not, but yeah, in the Scarlet Teal 2.0 campaign, there was they used Paku. They detailed that the actor used Paku, and I was really excited about this because when I was at Amazon, I heard about Paku. And I'm like, what's Paku? Nobody's talking about Paku at the time. And now we see actors are actually using it in the wild. So it's like, wow, yeah, you probably should be working with this tool. Pirates was, I don't know if I'm saying that right, pirates? Pirates, which, you know, it's a Kubernetes owning tool. This was also used in Scarlet Teal. And I apologize for missing a citation there. Oh, Sysdig, I do have it, good. Yeah, so that was research from Sysdig that they did. Yeah. Native APIs, we've already touched on this, but that's when you're documenting the use of APIs that are in the tools that you're using, the environments that you're using. You know, Boto 3, that's a big one, calls to Azure or GCP CLI. Those, all of this. They're challenging to detect and really the best way to move around once you're inside of a system. It lets defenders understand how to hunt and detect, and then red teams can also emulate this. And they're probably very good at doing it because they're used to using these native APIs. It's not like you have to learn a whole new thing. And then lastly, some limitations of cloud threat intel. So with great scale comes great responsibility. I don't know, I feel like there might be a company that has like a leadership principle that's similar to this, so I apologize. But it's important, like you need to, if you're running a service that's being used like all around the world, just like billions and billions of use cases, you need to be reporting on threats that happen to it. I don't think that it should be swept under the rug. We need to talk about what's happening in cloud service provider world. Maybe not from the service providers directly, but if someone who's doing incident response in the cloud can do it without making anybody sad, that would be wonderful. The shared responsibility model, again, it's often one-sided when info is shared. Customers will usually share to a service provider, and then it doesn't really, you know, you don't hear much back, right? And that seems, it's a little unfair, I think. I think that maybe in the traditional threat intel world or traditional, you know, incident response, the whole security world, people hear a little more back once you share with a vendor. So how can we work around this? I think that there should be a lot of communication happening in industry sharing groups, but I also, I don't love that a lot of them are like invite only, members only. Of course we don't want threat actors in there just like digging all the information out, but it's a little like, I don't know, it's a little bit like nepotism, and it's not very accessible or open, and I'm not a fan of that. Companies, please try not to litigate everything. Please, please. Yeah, easier said than done, but we need policy change. So what can we do better? Researchers with incident response data, please document your CSP API calls and other services, not just cloud service providers. Share forensic indicators. I would love to see something like the DFIR report for cloud. I think that would be awesome. Like just all the gritty details, anonymized, of course. We don't want anybody's like stock price to drop or insurance to go up. We just want data that we can use. Security and cloud vendors, legal teams. Yeah, maybe you can be helpful and draft sharing friendly language into customer contracts. I had a lawyer once call my writing dramatic. I felt a certain type of way about that, and I don't think it was. I was just trying to convey actionable information. So yeah, it's a little weird, uncanny valley. CSPs, I would love to see more sharing outside of the nepotism groups. Thank you. Maybe we could have a cloud ISAC. There's an ISAC for everything. I know there's like an IT ISAC that cloud probably falls under, but why not a cloud ISAC? And policymakers, I don't know if any of you are here, but please make good policies. I think there's a lot of change in the works in the cloud side. So this is a great time to do that. So in conclusion, like cloud threat actors, cloud TI, threat intel is still nascent, still finding its way. Actionability is very subjective. It's all about your team's needs and, you know, the information that you have. Hopefully as researchers, we can get you guys good information. That's my job. A lot of organizations probably lack support to generate meaningful intel for broad audiences. And what I mean is they might be NDA'd into oblivion. Industry collaboration could help, but it's not a substitute. So we need to find a way for people to share information without being penalized. Lastly, say no to information suppression. That ties in. Yeah, fight dystopia. I love all the EFF shirts around today. So yeah, here's some resources. These are just some cool links that help me understand cloud tricks and techniques better. And of course, a little bit of self-promotion with the research there. Cloud Village, I hope that's okay. Sorry. And yeah, I'm here for the booze. Questions, comments?
Great job, Alex.
Thank you.
For any questions, we can take them in the hallway. We're kind of
Awesome.
running low on time.
Yep.
All right, thanks so much.